as Caribbean people, we are not going to forget our history. We don't just want to hear an apology, we want reparation.
We want reparation.
Poor old David Lammy, his idea of bankrupting Britain by paying huge compensation to people in the Caribbean has been stymied by Starmer. Well, Starmer is great at breaking election promises, isn't he? And now he's got to find a way of getting rid of David Lammy before Trump becomes president, because Trump's not going to be happy with that guy as a foreign minister. I am Granniopteryx. I'm on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute and Minds. Well, that's it. If you're in a Caribbean country, there's going to be no free ride from the British government. I should think that many of you already know that. And if you're one of those people of Caribbean ancestry who voted for David Lammy in the last general election, well, now you've discovered that he was lying to you and just shooting off his mouth in the same way as he's done, for instance, about Donald Trump, making sure that Donald Trump feels particularly bad about meeting our foreign minister when he's elected. Right, so what happened was that a little while ago, in 2018, Mr. Lammy told his Twitter followers, as Caribbean people enslaved, colonised and invited to Britain, we remember our history. Not entirely, though. Caribbean people enslaved, colonised and invited to Britain. Well, yes, enslaved for sure. You weren't enslaved as Caribbean people, though, were you? You were enslaved as African people who were sold to the Europeans, in this case the British, by other African people. And then you were taken to the Caribbean. Now, that makes you the colonisers. Because after you'd been freed, why did you not go back to Africa, to your ancient tribes? Yeah, leaving on one side the problems of actually finding which tribe you were from. But that's not the point. The point is, you are not native to the Caribbean. In fact, the people who were native to the Caribbean were the indigenous tribes of the Taino and the Caribe. The Caribe came from the mainland originally, so they had colonised the Caribbean. And when the white people started turning up, they went back to the mainland. The Taino and a few others are still found in small pockets, according to this, on several of the mountainous islands, especially Cuba and Puerto Rico. So they are the original Caribbeans. Anybody who looks like David Lammy is a coloniser in that part of the world. So you weren't colonised. You are now the colonisers. Just remember that. And you were invited to Britain. Nobody shipped you here. You were invited. And it was a tough life. And many people who came from the Caribbean have done quite well in Britain and have received the benefits of British society. So there's nothing up with that either. You don't remember your history. You remember a version of your history which is possibly not altogether accurate. Let's just go back there. In 2018, Mr. Lammy told his Twitter followers, as Caribbean people enslaved, not by the Brits to begin with, colonised, no, you're the colonisers, and invited to Britain. That's the only accurate thing you've said so far. We remember our history, yeah? Right? Yes. well, I seem to remember your history better than you do. And he finished off with, we don't just want an apology, we want reparations and compensation. And that's his statement, and that's part of the reason he was elected. Because you see, there are many Caribbean people living in Britain who are perfectly reasonable members of British society, but they have relatives in the Caribbean. And so the idea that this might help their relatives, might even help them, this must have been a pull for some of them. Anyway, so he wants reparations and compensation, and this is what he has implicitly promised. There's one person here, Sir Hilary Beckles, the chairman of the Caribbean Community Reparations Commission, doesn't seem to think so. I mean, he doesn't seem to think that Lammy's changed his mind. He seems to think this should still go on. I don't understand why somebody who has a knighthood should be so interested in bankrupting the British government in this way. Various estimates have calculated that the final bill owed by Britain to the descendants of slaves could be anywhere between 200 billion and 18 trillion. Yeah, well, good luck with that. Now, Starmer, who is no stranger to breaking any sort of election promise, has said that there isn't going to be any compensation. So David Lammy, well, you got elected on false pretences, and I'm quite sure that you all knew that as well. Downing Street has ruled out paying slavery reparations to Caribbean countries ahead of a major Commonwealth summit. The Caribbean Community's 14 member states had been expected to push Sir Keir Starmer on the issue at next week's Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Samoa. But the Prime Minister's official spokesman confirmed on Monday there would be no cash from the government for countries wanting compensation relating to Britain's colonial past. And anyone who doesn't remember that Britain paid millions of pounds, I think they actually paid off their debt in 2005, buying the freedom of slaves in any British area of influence, and then dedicating part of the British Navy to patrolling the Atlantic to stop the transatlantic slave trade from whatever boat it was being conducted, and by putting pressure on the Ottoman Empire to stop the Mediterranean slave trade. I think that Britain has paid plenty for its principled stand on this issue of slavery. Until Britain got started, slavery was a norm throughout the world. Britain made slavery something at least to be ashamed of. And let's face it, Lammy is a person for whom we have to be thoroughly ashamed. I'm just waiting for those fireworks to start when Trump gets back to being president. Because Lammy was, typical student politics, shooting off his mouth about Trump, who is no racist, but he was calling him that anyway because, that's what the left does. And I'm quite sure Trump won't forget that Lammy called him a racist. And when Trump becomes president, I'd be very interested in seeing exactly how Starmer manages to get rid of David Lammy as our foreign minister. The future may not be as bright as I would wish, but it's certainly going to be interesting. Till next time, you can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.